Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? It is Thursday. It is January. It is January 28th. It is January 28th, 2021. 2120, yes. We've moved ahead a couple years. Why not? Let's just zoom into the future. Joe Biden's still president after all this time. Amazing. That insurrection we held at the Capitol in 2025 must have worked out beautifully. And the anti-aging serum as well, I suppose. So everything's working out great here in the future. No need to, I guess, have the rest of the program at this point. All smooth sailing for the next 100 years or so. And you can all take the day off. Now, isn't that great news? It's pretty good. An uplifting program this morning. What can I tell you? It's not too bad at the moment. Let's see. New York Times looking for reasons to criticize Joe Biden because they feel like they have to. So that's expected. And I think we can live with that. I think we might be able to make it through the day without stopping to discuss GameStop. But I did find a nice explainer on it if you are interested in figuring out what the hell is going on. Or at least a nice explainer on what's going on with the shorting of stock and how that works. I think I've had it explained to me before in the past, probably in a fashion that made me nod and say, okay, yes, now I get it, and then I forgot it after that, but this was a nice explanation. And I guess the only remaining question now is, how do we figure out if there are good guys in this situation? I'm not real sure whether there are or are not. It's an interesting topic in that it pits Wall Street professionals, who I think we're all relatively, I think our inclination is to say, that could be the bad guy in this situation, against Reddit dudes, which is another group of people that I usually stop and say, this could be the bad guy in this situation. As between the two of them, I don't know, but that's, I guess that's what makes the story somewhat interesting from, I guess, the political perspective that through which it has crept into my timeline. But I don't know. You'll let me know what you think, perhaps, about that one, and maybe I'll share with you at some point the short explainer that fit in somebody's Facebook post that was short enough to get captured in one screen cap and then tweeted out. So that's a good explainer on shorting anyway. And I don't know. Does anybody out there own GameStop stock at this point? I guess you can chime in and maybe use that KITM hashtag to let us know on Twitter. But I have my doubts about whether anybody decided to jump into that game. But it sure was an interesting explanation after spending 2 days studiously avoiding it. Maybe we'll get to it. Maybe we won't. I don't know. We'll see what Greg has on tap for us. I'll check out his raft of stories. Here's Bill's morning tweet letting you know what he thinks that we think we ought to do. I guess this is how he usually writes these things up. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. There's nothing you can do about that. I'm trying to stop it, but it's not working so far. Kagro X, me, David Waldman. Hi, how are you? Your host today. I spend some time listing the GOP members of Congress who need immediate long-term psychiatric help. Note to networks, he may go long. That's true. Even though the day started off with a story about going short, we might go long on this one. Marjorie Taylor Greene, more video emerging on this lunatic. Some of it I've seen, some of it I haven't. There were definitely some pieces of video that emerged yesterday that I had seen before. And I took note of at the time, but I don't think I remembered until now that they're reminding me of it, that was Marjorie Taylor Greene in the video. I recall seeing it, and we might even have shared it on the air, video of at that time, I guess, random lunatic person who had showed up in Washington, D.C. with the idea in her head. And this is the major problem with Marjorie Taylor Greene, is that And somebody put it really well on Twitter somewhere that she's like belligerently, aggressively stupid. And, you don't want to hang that label on people lightly, but she gets an idea in her head, and it doesn't matter what the grounding for the idea is. It's in her head, and that's that, and she's right and you're wrong about it, and that's the end of the inquiry. She had showed up in Washington in following the 2018 election, so I guess early 2019, and had inserted herself into the front office of then newly elected representatives Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. And guess what that confrontation was about? Yes, she chose two Muslim members of Congress to barge in and insist that constitutionally speaking, because she knows, constitutionally speaking, they both were not, in fact, members of Congress because they had chosen to swear in and to take their oaths by swearing in on a Quran, which would make sense for them because that is their holy text. And that's the sort of book that you're supposed to hold when you take oaths, unless you are an atheist, in which case many people sometimes will swear in on a copy of the Constitution. Or I think I just saw the other day someone swearing into one of the cabinet positions on a Constitution, but a Constitution being displayed on like an iPad, which is a new twist on everything. But okay. Anyway, she was there to insist that they weren't legally members of Congress, that they had to, by the dictates of the Constitution, swear in on a Christian Bible. And that was absolutely, positively, 100% in the Constitution. Anyone who has ever read it would know it. And, get out of her way because she's right and you're all wrong. It's amazing. And I had forgotten that was Marjorie Taylor Greene or whatever. Yeah, I think I got that right. And that was really amazing. And, there's a little bit of the confrontation in the office, although it's not much of a confrontation. They just kind of kick them out pretty quickly. But she manages to get on film. She has a film crew with her wherever she goes. I think that's weird. Even as a private citizen. A fraught term these days. Anyway, and she says, we want to talk to her about this because she has to swear in on a real Bible, and, the staff kicks her out. There's no confrontation with the members. She doesn't get that far. Then she films herself walking down the hall, actually, I think in some of the tunnels, as a matter of fact. Woo! I forgot to turn down the volume on the Zoom-boosted volume when I was... I guess I could put these through different channels sometime. I was boosting the volume on video yesterday, so Skype goes through the same channel. Anyway, through the tunnels that became an issue during the Capitol siege on January 6th, filming herself, insisting to everybody, and having her crew, whoever it was with her, all nodding and saying, yeah, in agreement, that she was absolutely, positively right. It was definitely in the Constitution that you had to use a Christian Bible to take the oath. There's no mention of that whatsoever. And of course, anybody who's ever read it would know, that would stand out to me. And it would stand out to you because anybody who's ever given even cursory high school, junior high school civics study to the Constitution knows that's exactly the sort of thing that would never have made it into the Constitution. It would have been avoided like the plague. The whole point of the Constitution was to avoid mandates like that. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, member of Congress now, walking around with it in her head that not only is it in there, but yes, the rest of us know, totally antithetical to everything the Constitution was written for, stands for, all the ideals of the Enlightenment-influenced founders who framed the document. But don't tell her that. She's Marjorie Taylor Greene. And in addition to following high school kids around and hounding them, that's, I guess, brings us to the new piece of tape from today. But we'll save that story for later because Greg is here. He's got good stories. Let's just get right to it. Good morning, Greg. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing fine.
Good.
I'm a little late today. I didn't get a chance to hear your introduction.
Oh.
I was thinking maybe I was going to do a little bit of the GameStop story.
Are you kidding?
And in order to do that, I had to teach myself what the heck short selling is, so I had to watch Trading Places at high speed for the 8 minutes that you were giving your introduction.
I have a little explainer that I put away. If you think that would make a good intro, a little screenshot from Facebook.
That would Explain her about what?
About what shorting actually is, if you really want to do the story.
That'd be great. I'll give you my explanation.
Sure.
Basically, amateur
way.
traders decided to corner the market in frozen orange juice, so the Duke brothers took a bath. That's, basically what
well,
happened.
if you remember the movie, you're in good shape. If all you remember is that they're having both cracked crab and lobster, well.
Right, exactly.
Uh-huh.
So here's the explanation that I came up with.
Okay.
And I'm going to go through the maths here.
Yeah, all right, let's do it.
Okay. I'm poor, you're rich.
Awesome.
Maybe you're a
Bye.
hedge fund.
Oh, what
Okay?
more?
You got a ton of money and you own a ton of stock.
This is
Right?
great.
You own billions
All
in
right.
stocks, and you happen to have at least
Yes.
200,000 shares of GameStop. I got nothing.
Oh, what am I, crazy?
But I know you. We went to school together.
Yes. All right.
So I call you and say, listen, David,
Yes.
you lend me
Hello.
$200
Yeah, that's my rich voice.
so I could hello so I could buy some stock. And you go, no way, dude. Who the heck are you? I never heard of you.
Oh.
But I tell you
That
what I
sounds
will
right.
do. You
Yes.
say to me, I will lend you 200 shares of GameStop. You give me $50, and you can borrow them for the day.
Borrow. Yes. Okay.
At the end of the day, you got to give them back.
All right. Why?
But I make $50. They were just sitting here anyway. I'm rich. The way I got rich is I make
I'm
money
rich.
on
You're
everything.
not rich. Okay.
So you give me $50, I'll give you 200 shares.
That's what I say to you.
Yeah.
All right.
And I said, okay, fine, deal. So now I have 200 shares. And I'm thinking to myself, the reason I did this is that GameStop is a brick and mortar store.
Right. Wow.
They sell games.
What?
And
Yes.
who's going to go out in a pandemic to a brick and mortar store and buy a game on a disc
Yes.
when I can download it over the internet? I don't have to go to GameStop. I can completely bypass them,
Okay.
use my gaming system, and download the game and just play.
True.
And so GameStop is not going to do well because their business model is antiquated.
All right.
So I bet that at the end of the day, the stock's going to be worth less than it is in the morning.
Okay.
That's certainly true over 2 weeks, but let's just compress it to a day.
All right. A day.
All right. So I look up the stock. I happen to have borrowed 200 shares from you. And the stock is going for $200 a share.
All right.
And I'm thinking, that's not going to last. That's ridiculous. So I sell your shares without telling you.
All right.
All right. And I got $40,000 in my pocket now, minus the $50 that I lent you.
Oh. All right.
That's a lot of money. I got $40,000 I didn't have, So I'm going to go out and I'm going to have, cracked crab and,
Yeah. And lobster, right? Both.
and lobster at the same time.
Extra primo good.
Now,
choice.
it turns out I got to give this stock back to you because I only borrowed it. But I don't have to do that till 4 o'clock when the market closes.
Oh.
So I'm going to have a great lunch.
Yeah.
And I'm betting that since GameStop has a bad business model, their stock's going to go down. And I got to buy that 200 shares back, give it to you.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm looking at the monitor and they're crashing. And so at 3:30, when I buy my 200 shares, it was going for $25. I sold it for $200 in the morning, but I'm buying it for $25. It only cost me $5,000. And then at 4 o'clock, here is your 200 shares back that I borrowed.
And I say, the hell did you do with
sold
these?
the morning stuff for $40. I bought the afternoon stuff for $5. I made $35,000 today. I sold short. I was smart. And
What
so
did I do?
it's a great idea because I knew GameStop wasn't going to do well.
Yes.
And that's what selling short is.
That's what. Yeah. When it works, I guess that's.
When it works,
yeah,
so
that's
here's the
basically
problem,
what I
okay?
read. Sure.
What
yeah.
if it didn't go down? What if it went up? Then I'd have to buy those 200 shares back at $400 a share. It would cost me $80,000. I made $40 in the morning, but I lost $80,000 in the afternoon. And so, minus the $50 that it cost me to borrow it from you.
Right.
And so if the stock price goes up instead of down, I'm screwed.
Right.
And instead of making money, I lost a lot of money.
And you have to
And that's
pay.
why selling short doesn't always work.
And you get
And that's how Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy screwed the Duke brothers.
Right. You know perfectly well we don't have $40,000 or whatever you'd have to pay in order to make up the difference. It was much more.
Turn those machines back on.
You're right. There's been a Duke on this exchange since GameStop was founded, and whenever that was. So that's a pretty good explanation.
Short. And the thing is
yes.
that a lot of rich people like you, these hedge fund people, put billions of dollars into this, expecting that GameStop was going to tank, and it didn't. And there's a couple of reasons why it didn't. One reason why it didn't is because they were doing not well, and another different rich guy who was the founder of Chewy.com, which is a online, if you have pets, you know exactly what Chewy is.
Or you watch enough TV, jeez.
Yeah, you can order your pet treats from them, and they'll deliver them right to your door.
Wow, I never heard of such a thing. I thought that failed before, but all right.
So he made a lot of money because he then sold his business, which was thriving, to somebody else.
A dog.
I forget.
Probably.
Some other pet food company.
That sounds delicious.
So he makes billions, and he invests in GameStop and says to them, hey, you got to turn your model around. You got to be the broker that sells these games online rather than brick and mortar store. And if you do that, you will do a lot better, and you won't go bankrupt, and your stock will go up. And so he invested a lot of money in GameStop and is trying to turn the company around. And he has a lot of money to invest because he made his money on Chewy. And now that GameStop's stock is going up, he can go to the bank and say, hey, look at what the stock is worth now. Lend me a whole lot more money at cheaper prices, and I'll make it up to you because I'll turn this company around. And so they sort of stop dropping.
Yeah.
But then it gets even more interesting. A whole bunch of people on Reddit, little guys, say, hey, look at what's going on here. It's like trading places. Let's get in on this. Let's screw the Duke brothers.
Yeah, I wonder why they got the idea that it could be
they're
done.
Sitting around. They have a little money to spend.
They like games.
They don't have a lot of money to spend, but there's lots of them.
And they love
They
games.
get together on Reddit, and they decide that they're going to be in on this too, and they're going to drive the stock price up. And each one of them may not spend a lot of money, but a whole lot of them together is a lot of buying power. They can keep the stock price inflated. They'll screw the hedge fund guy who is betting short. Yeah. And so the hedge fund guy who's betting short, and there is such a person, is losing billions while these guys are having fun. Now, they may lose their money in the end because it's a bubble and it'll burst. And eventually everybody has to return the stock to you, so you'll make money because you were lending it to everybody.
Yeah.
And the people who are, if you're a lawyer, you're going to make money whether you win or lose the case. If you're a broker and you're selling stocks, you don't really care if the stock goes up or down. Right. You're going to make money on the transaction. There'll be people who make money on this no matter what happens. But in the meantime, this thing is taking a roller coaster ride up and up and up and up and up. And the people who invested billions of dollars expecting it to go down are Mortimer and Randolph Duke on the trading floor looking at the machines and saying, turn those machines back on.
Yeah.
We don't have money to cover this. We're going to get busted. And so, it's capitalism on steroids, and it's pretty fascinating to watch. It's not necessarily good because it's not going to end well. And the people who you think you're screwing are going to find some way to make money anyway, and you'll probably not. That's usually how it works out.
Well, I'm the rich guy. I usually do.
But if you want to find out more about this, Kyle Orland is the gaming author for Ars Technica, and he's written a couple of pieces about it, Gaming the System, how GameStop stock surged 1,500% in 9 months. And his latest one is called The Complete Moron's Guide to GameStop's Stock Roller Coaster. How does this big rally end, and can it be repeated? And so I've been reading those, and that's how I know as much as I do. It's not like I know anything about this stuff.
You started as a complete moron, and now you know.
Well, that's so good. I just thought it was a really fascinating
It kind of
example
is.
of what can happen here. And it's one of those things where like it's relevant today, but not relevant tomorrow. So I thought I'd tell that story.
I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those weird bubbles and fantastic things that come along every once in a while. Yeah, I don't know what to make of it, only because generally speaking, both Wall Street hedge funders and Reddit people are really not my kind of person. Typically, I'm sure there are great ones out there, but yeah, this seems like a little weird. But it was a pretty good explanation, I think, of shorting, borrowing somebody else's stock that's otherwise just sitting there doing nothing, and paying rent to do it. So you're willing to lend them, and then it's just a gamble. Does the stock go up or down? The real mystery is, what is a hedge fund doing, investing so heavily in its bet on GameStop? Like, GameStop's really just not a big deal, but I guess somewhere they thought they had them pegged on the fundamentals, which I guess is
so
what
in the
you
movie
explained.
Trading Places.
Yeah.
The reason that Randolph and Mortimer Duke tried to corner the market on orange juice futures is they got wind that it was a really bad winter and there was a freeze and the oranges are all going to be ruined. And they know and nobody else knows. So it's insider trading.
Okay.
And they figure with that knowledge, they can sell short and make a bundle.
Yeah,
and it's fueled and by Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy feeding them a bogus agriculture report. Those agriculture reports actually exist. So they really thought they knew what they were doing when they went and made this move. And so the hedge funds buying, billions of dollars of stock for GameStop, really figured, I'm not saying it's insider trading, but they really figured, like you said, they completely knew the fundamentals of what was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean,
and they were right. And so they knew, and they had the money to make a profit on your loss, on their loss, on GameStop loss.
I think it was otherwise a good guess.
They could be right in the end, and they still may wind up making a whole lot of money. It's just that in the short term, no.
Right.
They're taking a bath.
But it might be bad enough to bankrupt some of these funds in the meantime, which, again, it's I guess depending on who you are and where you stand, bankrupted a hedge fund? Great. Or
bad. That's my money. Okay. Right. That's why it's not like, oh, this is fun, let's buy popcorn. Yeah. Now, they won't go bankrupt because there's other hedge funds with billions on their own who are just pouring money into this particular hedge fund because they know each other. They used to work with each other. This particular hedge fund has made money for them in the past, and everybody knows everybody else, and so for now the system is stable. It's not crashing like in the Obama years. With McCain and Obama striving to see who could withstand going on. This is, of course, the Bush years. The Bush administration, 2008. But it's stable. And that's why people are watching with interest, because it sort of exposes to the general public, civilians like me, the games that go on in the stock market that you don't usually see. But this one is like completely and totally in the open. So, you want naked capitalism? Here it is.
I guess so. Yeah, well, it was pretty interesting. And certainly the idea of regular people making a small fortune enough to change their lives, but not necessarily make them, millionaires or billionaires, at the expense of people who already were millionaires and billionaires and still will be at the end.
Trading places.
Not too bad. Yeah, I guess so. Interesting. Well, I know it's funny that it would happen to be GameStop. GameStop is something that's actually come to my attention. Well, my kids make me take them to GameStop to buy games, that's for sure. But my older son, who's actually something of he ended up as being something of a stock guru in some weird way. He's not a big investor, but when he is asked about these things, and he's an economics student, he makes some good picks. And he did tell me a while ago, going on a year or two ago, that GameStop was probably in trouble just pre-pandemic. Just kids don't need to go to GameStop anymore. Haven't you noticed, Dad, that we don't make you drive us to GameStop anymore? It's just not the way kids buy games. And if you're in the game business, paying rent at a mall is not the place to be at the moment. And His financial interest in it was, let's, you and me, he spoke to his brother, use up all of our GameStop gift cards ASAP because the place may go bankrupt and you'll be holding all these gift cards. So go buy.
So you were aware of the fundamentals. And had you actually been a really super wealthy hedge fund guy, you might have taken advantage of it.
Yeah, maybe. Or buying other kids' gift cards at a discount if I really wanted to be evil about it.
Yeah, and that's how it goes.
Huh. All right. Well, pretty good. And he's done well elsewhere, too. One day we'll do a stock show on what he's buying.
No, you have to have somebody who knows what they're talking about. I can't help you there.
I've
now exhausted the limits of everything I know about the stock market.
Okay, that's fine. As long as we get that seafood we were talking about.
Meanwhile,
I think it's all fine. Yeah.
Did you cover in the beginning?
I don't know. No, it was all this.
Marjorie Taylor Greene throwing out the reporter from her press conference?
No, I mean, I got to Marjorie Taylor Greene being crazy, but I didn't get to that one.
That's where I tuned in. And
okay.
I just didn't know if you covered that.
And I was going to
before the break. She invited the press to listen to one of her town meetings, and when the press person asked a question, she tried to have them arrested.
Yes, that was it.
Because when you're a fascist, you're a fascist.
Right. I saw it this morning, and my comment on it was, I was comparing it to the piece we saw yesterday, in which she felt completely free and at ease to hound a teenage kid on the street over and over who was not interested in talking to her. But so when it's Marjorie Taylor Greene asking the questions, anything goes. If you're asking Marjorie Taylor Greene the questions, that's hard and therefore illegal, and you need to be thrown out. Gimmitarianism in a nutshell. Well done. She's crazy.
She's crazy. She is a fascist. And, the thing is, she was elected by her constituents who are perfectly happy with what she's doing. Right. And I go back to what we talked about on the show yesterday and on Monday. There's something terribly wrong with Republican voters because they are completely authoritarian and supporting these folks who should lose these and get thrown out of Congress. We'll see what happens. A procedure question for you on that when we come back.
Oh, okay. Yes. Well, she does certainly deserve to be thrown out. But, the constituents are easy to understand. It's gimmitarianism in its purest form. I like it when the things that you do are stuff that I wish I could do, and I hate it when things I hate happen. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I have shorted the next segment, so I think I'm going to be a millionaire at the end of this, but I'm not certain I understood the fundamentals of what I bet on. But Greg, yes, you had some procedural questions about something. What were we going to talk about?
I do. So here's the Washington Post story. A reporter tried to ask Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene about her false claims. The journalist was threatened with arrest.
Yes.
This was a public town hall to which media had been invited.
Yes.
And that's a story from the Washington Post. So this actually happened. How she got the sheriff to threaten the reporter, I don't know. I guess they're all QAnon people, and they make the proper hand signs to each other. But Marjorie Taylor Greene's actions, which you've outlined in depth and which this is part of, have upset Democratic members of the House of Representatives. Andrea Ocasio-Cortez was talking about this yesterday and basically said, look, they're threatening to kill us, and our Republican colleagues are sitting there in silence. Yes. And in fact, as somebody pointed out, they have a lot more nasty things to say about Liz Cheney than they do about Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. And so that tells you where they are at. And AOC was simply saying, that is where they are at. Let's understand this. So because that's been an upsetting thing to watch, Representative Jimmy Gomez of California said that he will be introducing a resolution to expel Marjorie Taylor Greene from Congress.
Awesome.
Which is, of course, something that should happen, and therefore, of course, something that won't happen. Mm-hmm. And as the article says, it's not clear when Gomez will be introducing the resolution and how much support it'll have among other House members. That would be crucial because you can't get it done without support. So I was just wondering if you could explain to us a little bit about the expulsion rules.
Well,
how does that work? There's no filibuster in the House.
No, it's not something you see very often because it's a pretty extreme remedy, and also because it's tough to get to. Expulsion is described in the Constitution as one of the prerogatives of both of the houses, that they can expel their members either in the House or Senate, but it takes a 2/3 vote of the body to do that. And I think, if you really want to get down into the weeds of it, I think it just takes 2/3 of those present and voting. It doesn't require 2/3 of those, as they say, chosen and sworn, the full House or the full. As if you happen to have a very small group of people who are there and 2/3 of them are ready to expel you, I guess that will work. But yeah, in the House, of course, no filibuster. In the Senate, I am unsure about whether or not it would be a resolution that would be privileged in some way, in some way from the filibuster. Given that it requires a 2/3 vote to pass, it would be, wouldn't be all that necessary to filibuster it. I mean, if you think you're going to surpass the 2/3 vote and the person's going to be expelled, you could try to filibuster, but obviously they would invoke cloture on you pretty quickly anyway, because they'd only need 60 to do that. So it's at least a non-factor over there. But yeah, the Constitution allows you to kick people right back out of the House. Marjorie Taylor Greene is certainly a good candidate for it, but we haven't gotten, I don't think, to the critical mass of shame about her among the Republican members of Congress. I mean, they're almost 50% of the House as it is. Getting them to agree to something that would require 2/3 is a tall order. As AOC was pointing out, they're perfectly happy with that. They're angrier at Liz Cheney than they are at her, even though she's completely crazy.
This is a situation where you won't go broke by selling the House short, meaning if your opinion of them is going to be lower at the end of the day than at the beginning of the day,
that's a good analogy.
You'll win because you'll be right.
Yes.
The problem with the Republican conference,
yes, right,
is half of them agree with her and the other half are afraid of their constituency. Yes. So they're not going to ever do this.
Yeah.
And that's bad. And, you have to treat them as if they are bad. And that's why having a Democratic majority in both houses, plus the White House, is so damn important right now. Yeah.
Well, you can at least highlight it. If you weren't the majority, you'd have no hope, and your resolution would get tabled quickly. Whether the House leadership, the Democratic leadership, is interested in having that fight happen now, or whether they want to, as the metaphor goes, give her more rope to, hang herself with, is an open question. And honestly, nobody wants to give her rope.
Do they want to give her enough rope to hang Mike Pence? That's really
right. You don't know what's going to happen to that rope. So you don't want to give her any. Yeah, so it's a question of how do they think Republicans respond to this? Do they think people think it's a waste of time? There are plenty of other members who probably should also be on that list, but publicly speaking, the case hasn't yet been made for the others in the way that her own record is making clear for Marjorie Taylor Greene. So yeah, I think the time to try it is now or pretty soon. She's a dangerous person, and there are other things you might want to do in the meantime, because this is such a long shot. But I think eventually she may get to the place where Republicans find it advantageous to distance themselves. She's just that kind of person.
Right. And again, it happened with Steve King in the sense of getting thrown off of committees. Kevin McCarthy has his hands full here. I don't have a high opinion of the Republican conference, so I don't know what they're going to wind up doing for reasons already expressed.
Yes.
But she's bad.
She is bad.
People need to understand she's really bad. She's a bad person. She's a terrible congressperson.
She's a dangerous
person. Bad person.
Like physically
really
dangerous to have in the House. True. The parliamentary language, the code word for that, the olden days, members of Congress used to refer to members that they held in minimal high regard.
Yes, minimal high regard.
So, yes, my good friend,
which is a nicer way of saying
I hold in minimal high regard. Yeah, so, right. She's dangerous. She's the one that I've, been pointing out since September has campaigned on the platform of assassinating Democrats and is a gun nut and is trying, like Lauren Boebert, to bring her gun with her onto the floor all the time and is on the record in favor of the QAnon conspiracies that holds that all of her Democratic colleagues are vampire pedophiles. So who knows when she finally snaps.
Right. That's the interesting thing is, Lauren Boebert made the gun issue much more prominent because she owns a restaurant where people pack and because she made a big stink of wanting to carry a gun onto the floor of the House. But you're right. Marjorie Taylor Greene is the more dangerous of the two because Boebert looks like it's all for show. Marjorie Taylor Greene was harassing a Parkland kid, right after that tragedy about Second Amendment rights. Yes. Far more dangerous and far more difficult and far more impactful and meaningful.
Yes.
And so, she's the more dangerous of the two.
She is. She campaigned also as well, holding, doing ads, TV ads, holding her AR-15 and talking about how AOC had to be taken out. Like, okay, that should ordinarily just get you arrested, but you're a candidate for Congress at the moment.
As well as the Facebook page about something bullet to Pelosi's head.
Right, that too.
They're actual real things that she has expressed, and it'd be horrifying.
The video that I was watching late yesterday afternoon and early this morning, I was talking about earlier this morning, where she shows up as not as a congressperson, but 2 years before she ran, shows up in Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib's office insisting that they're not really members of Congress because they didn't take their oaths on a Christian Bible. And she had a Bible with her, and were they going to come out and take the oath as she insisted they needed to do? And, of course, she gets tossed out. And I was talking about just how, like I said, aggressively, belligerently stupid she is about the need for the oath to be on a Christian Bible because I read it in the Constitution, which she clearly could not have. But the only ray of hope about her danger level is I will point out that when she was a nobody, she tried barging into Ilhan Omar's office to force her to take the oath on a Bible. As a member of Congress, when they couldn't throw her out, I noticed that she did not find I have no other word for it, but I guess we'll put it in scare quotes. She did not find the courage, if that's what it is, at that point to seek out Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib and insist loudly in front of everybody on C-SPAN, no, hold up. They're not using Christian Bibles. They're not really a member of Congress, where everybody could have seen immediately, oh my God, she's nuts and she thinks she's a member. We really need to do something about it. She forgot about that small problem now that she's there on official business. But when she was a nobody and didn't matter, she felt freer to pretend she was going to insist that this was true.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to hold her in less than minimal high regard.
I hope so. My question is, can the Office of the Attending Physician hold her for a psychiatric evaluation?
Well,
that I'd like to know about. I think that they would say, it's beyond my bailiwick, if you will. But, I mean, look, you're a physician. I need your opinion on this. Is this person a danger to herself and others?
Fantasies aren't reality, and so you're going to have a hard time with that one. But speaking of people who I hold in less than minimal high regard, this is a piece from Alabama Political Reporter, which has another member of Congress, this time on the Senate side, who is not distinguishing himself in any way, shape, or form in terms of the legislative acumen that body is known for. Photos put Tommy Tuberville in Trump's hotel on January 5th despite denying a meeting. The
Aha.
photos in Facebook post put Tuberville,
That
Donald
guy.
Trump Jr., Peter Navarro, Rudy Giuliani, and others at the Trump Hotel on January 5th. I
Yes.
found that of interest because yesterday I saw a little piece about one of the conspirators and insurrectionists touting
Yeah.
the fact in one of these, because
was there
it's
too.
like if you're going to storm the Capitol, if you're going to storm the Bastille, it's really important to have it on Facebook and Instagram.
Clearly. Yes.
And so some guy was saying, yeah, we had a great meeting in the hotel. A lot of senators were here and Donald
Yes.
Trump Jr., and we're really stoked for what happens tomorrow. And I saw that bit and said, senators?
Yeah.
What senators were there? Well, it turns out Tommy Tuberville was there because there was a picture of him.
Now he denied that he was there. I traced this story back a little bit yesterday to try to find a good solid report on it, and it was mostly written from the perspective of Oklahoma, from I think right now Oklahoma or no, the Omaha, Nebraska. Omaha World Herald wrote about a potential gubernatorial candidate in Nebraska, billionaire type guy who was at that meeting. And there's not a lot of like mainstream
Billionaire probably made
media
his money
coverage
selling
of it
short.
yet. He may have, but now that they're able to establish that the senators were at least in the building, we're going to see a little bit more reporting about that. So, yeah, Tommy Tuber I still haven't made out yet whether he's Tuberville or Tuberville, but Tuberville sounds dumber, so I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, well, looking at his picture there,
I think you might be
Tuberville
right.
works just fine.
That could be right. But yes, several senators, and now the big question, who else are these other senators, and what were they doing, and why the January 5th meeting? And then I also learned that they met in I guess Donald Trump maintains a private residence in one of the floors of his hotel, which I didn't know that he did, or that he's entitled to, given that it's government property, but whatever.
Well, here's again from the Alabama Political Reporter.
Okay.
After Tuberville
Whatever his
denied
name
all
is.
of this stuff.
Yes.
Charles W. Herbster,
That's the guy.
who was
from
then the
Nebraska.
national chairman of the Agriculture and Rural Advisory Committee in Trump's administration, in a Facebook post on January 5th, said that he was standing in the private residence of the president at Trump International with the following patriots who were joining me in a battle for justice and truth. Among the attendings, according to his post, were Tuberville, former RAGA Director Adam Piper, that's the Republican Attorney General's Association, who had to resign over this.
Oh.
Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, Trump's former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, Advisor
yes.
Peter Navarro, Trump's 2016 campaign manager Corey Lewandowski, and 2016 deputy campaign manager David Bossie, all of whom I have less than minimal regard. And so if there were other senators there, I'd like to know about it, but Senator Tuberville was there.
Yeah. And then the day later, Rudy is leaving random messages on somebody else's voicemail, hoping to get to Tuberville, saying, hey, we need you to delay. Make sure that
And
this
then Daniel
count doesn't
Beck,
go forward.
CEO of an Idaho technology company, in a Facebook post on January 5th, wrote that he'd spent the evening with Tuberville, Trump Jr., girlfriend Kimberly Guilfoyle, Michael Lindell,
Oh, right,
my
pillow guy.
Navarro, and Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani.
Wow.
So, lock them all up.
Yeah. Crazy's not contagious.
Right. I don't see any other senators mentioned. But, this is cited at the Omaha World Herald, as you were saying. And the newspaper also reported that Herbster met Tuesday in Trump's private residence in his Washington, D.C. hotel with Trump's sons, Donald and Eric.
Mm-hmm.
And they discussed how to pressure more members of Congress to object to the Electoral College results. So, it's notable that Herbster deleted his Facebook post after they started asking about it.
Yeah.
And questions to Tuberville's spokeswoman later on Tuesday, clarifying the point, asking whether Tuberville had met with these people, weren't answered. And the Alabama Political Reporter also sent the spokeswoman screenshots of the photo of Tuberville in the hotel's lobby, and as of this writing, hasn't received a response in any way, shape, or form.
All right.
So
I
all
do
of that
see
is out there. And just to remind you that, yes, we do know for a fact that the senators on the Republican side would really prefer not to convict Donald Trump, because that would be convicting themselves.
Yes.
Like
Although they
Tuberville,
could
for
deny
example.
it. Didn't
Who
say,
is
"No,
who
it
is
isn't,"
a witness,
and a juror.
a subject of interest,
Yes,
and a
right.
juror, and ain't the Senate great?
Yeah, it's really something. And for all the people who are witnesses and active participants and jurors at the same time, they're all giving speeches about how isn't it horrible that somebody who voted to go ahead with this trial is presiding in a role of what would be judge if this was taking place in a court. And, well, I don't know. Usually judges, if they are presiding over a case, do believe a case should go forward. I have not yet met the judge who says, I actually don't think there's a case here, but what the hell, let's do it anyway, just to be fair. But, you know, that's generally speaking the way judges approach things. If they are there, it's because they believe they should be. So, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I see in this Alabama Political Reporter piece here that Beck, the activist guy who was posting his Facebook account of things that accidentally indicated that or contradicted Tuberville's denials, says there were commenters in his post saying, look at what's going on at the Capitol. Is this what you were discussing? Because this is terrible. And he says, oh, no. That's not what we were talking about. We were talking about some other very calm way of overturning the results of the election.
No, we were just discussing orange juice futures.
Yeah, right, basically.
Nothing
And
to do with insurrection and violence.
I mean, certainly I wouldn't doubt that they discussed that the crowd would go there. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of them anyway thought, yeah, just having a large crowd outside yelling will be the pressure we're talking about. I didn't mean for them to break in and try to assassinate everybody.
This was made to be a Brooks Brothers riot, and it turns out they were not wearing Brooks Brothers suits like we intended. They were wearing military camo.
Yeah,
that's not what we intended. That's not what we talked about at the hotel that night.
Right, exactly. Not exactly what we had in mind. It's Sergeant Brooks is here to riot, but not the Brooks Brothers. And remember, of course, Trump was all upset because they looked low class. So, he wasn't into it.
It was a military surplus, right?
Yeah, right. That's true. Brooks Brothers military surplus store. Yeah, you can't even say it was well-tailored stuff either. It didn't fit all that well. But okay, maybe that's what made him think it was low class. Oh, they're military. We think they're suckers.
Meanwhile, let's switch gears and talk about politics a little bit and about the upcoming how is Joe Biden going to get anything done.
Okay.
I'm going to start with this very nice piece from David Rothkopf. It's in Daily Beast this morning. Joe Biden's done more good in a week than Donald Trump did in 4 years. So let's start there. Of course, Trump did virtually no good, he says. And yes, it's early. But there are specific things about this administration that give ample reason for hope. Like they're organized, they seem to be grown-ups, they seem to be making a plan, they're discussing things, they're open about it, they're working with Congress, and it's that Congress working with piece that I want to cover in the few minutes remaining for my segment here. Right. This one is from Jake Sherman, Punchbowl AM. He used to do Politico playbook, and I have some stuff on the people who took that over on the same topic. But here's his Punchbowl discussion this morning. Sweet 16 Republicans turned skeptical. And if you want the too long didn't read version of this, Republicans are trying to work with Democrats to slow things down and try to neuter and water down everything, and Democrats aren't having it, and so those Republicans are getting upset.
All right.
Sweet 16 Republicans turned skeptical. We can't speak for every R or D in the Sweet 16, TM, but we can say this without a doubt. This frustration on the Republican side that Biden, Schumer, and Democrats appear headed toward taking a one-party approach to COVID relief. Now, that would make us happy and them sad, but, that's the way it goes. This anger is most acute with Collins, Portman, Murkowski, according to sources familiar with the state of play. These centrist R's say Democrats are moving way too quickly toward reconciliation, which they take as a signal that Democrats have no interest in the GOP support. Now, the other side of the coin is what votes are these people bringing to the table? 3 Republican centrists unhappy with how quickly the Democrats want to move without bringing 15 or 16 or 17 votes with them is a useless exercise on the part of those Republicans. That's me talking, not Jake Sherman.
Hoping,
But the fact of the matter is, The state of play is such that Democrats think that there are urgent problems that need to be taken care of simply from the country needs it point of view. Forget about politics. But then the other side of that is that if the Democrats don't get stuff done, they'll get thrown out. And so this is a case of doing well by doing good. And so there's every impetus, every reason for the Democrats to get stuff done. And if Republicans are going to try to block doing that, well, that means discussing the filibuster, and it also means discussing reconciliation. We don't have to go through that in just a few minutes because reconciliation is complicated. But it is a method where you can get stuff done by a majority vote, and getting rid of the filibuster is another way that you can get stuff done by a majority vote.
Right.
And it turns out Democrats are serious about doing this, and Republicans are getting upset because they're realizing that. And that's really what's going on here. Right?
Basically.
So for all of you people who like to sell the Democrats short, and now we understand what that term actually means.
Yes.
That it turns out the Democrats are perfectly willing to play hardball, and the Republicans are getting upset because that is not what they bargained on when they saw the Democrats take over. They figure that Mitch McConnell could bully them into treating the minority like the majority, and they ain't having it.
Oh. Well, now, what's the backup plan?
So Political Playbook
No one knows.
inside the White House's new thinking on COVID relief. And my point is that they're going to have COVID relief, a Voting Rights Act, and maybe some other legislation, including climate stuff, on the table and bring to a vote relatively quickly compared to how these Republican centrists feel about trying to spend 3.5 years trying to get Republican votes to go along. And that's not the way they're going to play it. The White House looks to split the COVID package in two, says Political Playbook.
Okay.
NEC Director Brian Deese and COVID czar Jeff Zients are scheduled to call into the weekly Democratic Senate lunchtime meeting today. The two Biden aides will face an increasingly impatient caucus.
Oh.
The fact that the Democrats are impatient is music to my ears.
Yes, that was a big
They
problem.
have to move fast. They have to get this stuff done. They can't get Lucy and the football on this all the time. And it turns out they're not. Just like on the organizing resolution. They're doing fine.
Okay, good. So they understand the urgency. The worry about taking their time, I guess, harkens back to the passage or the attempt to pass the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, back in 2010 and having the process drawn out. Well, maybe if we do this, that, or the other thing, we'll get a couple of Republican votes and make this bipartisan rather than just saying, forget it, we're just going to push it through ourselves.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Good.
Now, progressives are worried that Biden is too eager to cut a deal. Moderates are wondering why Deese hasn't circled back with information they've requested. But here's what we're told is the current White House thinking. The Deese mission is to figure out what a 60-vote package looks like. Biden aides are clear-eyed that such a deal would be far short of his $1.9 trillion proposal. A 60-vote deal would have skimpier funding for state and local relief, less money for vaccine distribution, unemployment insurance, and nutritional assistance. It would have far more targeted relief checks. We're told by administration sources that might cost $600 to $800 billion. The left would revolt, and that's where Part 2 comes in. Okay, so you get what you can pass with 60, and everything that's left out of the so-called skinny relief package, you add it to Biden's Build Back Better plan, and then you pass that with reconciliation. And that only requires a simple majority.
Familiar. Okay.
And voila, Biden satisfies moderates with bipartisanship and progressives with the jobs bill.
Okay.
That's the theory. In practice, a deal isn't going to happen for 60 votes because those Republicans complaining that the Democrats are moving too fast is telling you those votes aren't there. So they're going to have to do everything with reconciliation or getting rid of the filibuster. That's the state of play right now as I see it. And at the same time, Democrats realize this, and it's not like we have to tell them from the sidelines that this is going on because they don't realize that Republicans aren't going to vote with them. They know it. They know it better than we do. They talk to these guys.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that should be the theory. They are right there. You can ask them.
They are right there, you know.
Reading newspaper,
and,
say no.
I would think the two parties right now with impeachment on the table, with people like Marjorie Taylor Greene representing Republicans, I don't think the parties like each other right now.
No. Parties don't like themselves in the case of Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Well, in the case of Republicans, they got much, much bigger problems. And again, this is all going to fall not so much on Pelosi's plate, but on Kevin McCarthy's plate, because he's got to hold that conference together. And I think Nancy Pelosi has already shown that she can hold the Democratic caucus together when she needs to.
Hope so.
How do you know? You'll see something come through the floor. What does that mean? It means that Nancy Pelosi is a damn good vote counter.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't go to the floor if they don't have the votes.
Pretty much. It's the way she can measure her thinking on these things. I think I can do it, then bring it. If
right.
not,
On the other hand,
wait.
if we don't have the votes to expel Marjorie Taylor Greene, just might get tabled. And, we've seen that with how she approached impeachment the year before she did impeachment.
True.
That's exactly what she did. People kept bringing up the let's impeach Trump, and she kept tabling it until she thought that the votes were there, and then she went ahead and did it.
Yeah, or she certainly held them back. I mean, there might be a calculation here that since, you only needed a majority to get to the impeachment, so it would be very embarrassing if you couldn't put that together. Might be a slightly different calculation, and they might say it's worth doing to have all the Democrats, and let's see if there are any Republicans who will vote yes to expel. And if so, then maybe we'll bring it to the floor and see if we can shame other Republicans into changing their votes later on if we have to bring this measure again. Or she may just say, unless you can bring me 50 Republicans, I don't want to do it.
Right. Now, why am I less worried about Pelosi holding her fractious caucus with a very small majority together? This piece also from the same Politico playbook. We're all totally freaked out. We're hearing that lawmakers, particularly House Democrats, are reaching their wits' end over the lack of guidance on how to protect themselves and their family amid heightened security threats.
Yes.
On Wednesday, the Homeland Security Department issued a bulletin that the domestic extremists behind the deadly January 6th riot, and note the language there, could continue to mobilize to incite or commit violence, egged on by people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, by the way, and everybody who met on January 5th in the lobby, including Tommy Tuberville. Lawmakers want answers from Democratic leadership who, unlike the rank and file, already have their own security details. Yes. Expect to hear more on this when House Democrats return next week. We're all totally freaked out about this. One tells us more from the New York Times. So there's impetus to get this stuff done and treated seriously, including the threat of Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah,
that's my segment,
good.
And I will be back on Monday. Don't sell this show short.
Right, I'm selling it on Sunday. That's difficult to do. The markets will be closed, so that's good. You're protected that way. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it, as always. And, plenty to talk about. We'll continue with this in just a minute, and we'll see you Monday. Take care. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Tell you what, let's see. Here is a good thing we can transition with. Not actually a transition off of our subjects just yet, actually, but Rebecca Roman sends us this John Aravosis thread from when? Yesterday. I guess with John coming to the conclusion that the rest of us also are coming to about Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I guess having a look back on his own about all of the crazy videos and Facebook comments that she has cataloged over the years. It won't surprise you. Some of them you will have heard about on your own. Some of them you will have heard about already on the show. Others appear to be new, but they won't be surprising to you. The basic theme here is, before she was a member of Congress, she was an internet loon. And she garnered a big following among lunatics, who ordinarily there's not enough of a critical mass in your neighborhood for you to find enough people to feel like you're really onto something. And that's one of the great values of the internet, is it shows you that even if you're a lunatic, you're not alone, and other lunatics will join you from all over the world, and it'll make you feel like you have a local community, even though you really don't. But anyway, so there's room for building a fan base by posting videos professing extraordinarily stupid things. And what motivated her ordinarily to post extraordinarily stupid things? No shortage of mass shootings in this country, so there was plenty of fodder for her. And her basic theme was the Alex Jones thing, that every mass shooting isn't in fact evidence that we need to do something about guns, but rather evidence that evil Democrats are engineering these things to fool smart, woke Republicans into becoming dumb, I guess, sleeping Republicans and agreeing that something needs to be done about guns. So that regularly she would just make videos, and in the paranoid style, she films most of them in her car for whatever reason. And so, yes, every mass shooting that came along, she would launch the same Alex Jones conspiracy theory. Here's John's way of putting it. He says, so I was doing a little reading and writing about QAnon-friendly freshman GOP Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene today. And as loopy as I knew she was, what I read today was far worse than I ever imagined. Let me summarize. The first one you may have seen yesterday in circulation as well. In a 2017 video posted to Facebook, Greene expressed doubt that the perpetrator of the 2017 Las Vegas shooting, a large-scale incident she believes was intended as an attack on the right to bear arms, acted alone. In other words, she thinks it was a false flag thing, that the usual dumb stuff. The Las Vegas shooting, he shot so many people that he couldn't possibly have been acting alone, which is an extraordinarily ignorant viewpoint for a gun nut in particular to take. But this happens all the time, and it's not necessarily a gun nut position to take. Every mass shooting, every shooting attack comes with initial speculation that there's more than one gunman, and usually turns out not to be the case. I guess sometimes, obviously, it's going to turn out to be true, but it's usually based on the number of people shot and the number of gunshots that witnesses heard. And I guess people, for some reason, still believing that no single person could fire so many bullets in such a short amount of time. And we're constantly refining our weaponry so that that's exactly what you can do. And of course, the Las Vegas attack included the use of bump stocks on assault rifles that make them fire like machine guns. And there's no way one person could have fired all those rounds, except if they were using the product that I, as a gun nut, sell on my website, which enables even handgun owners to fire their weapons like machine guns. But somehow I forgot about all of that. So, Marjorie Taylor Greene, not ever internally consistent in her crazy. That's one of the problems with her, but I guess that's where your belligerent ignorance comes in. It doesn't occur to her that she's being internally inconsistent. Even yesterday in the video of her chasing David Hogue down the street, where one of the first things she says to him is, this would never have happened if the armed guard that was posted at your school had done his job. And then like a minute passes, and then she says, the real answer to those problems isn't the things that you are here to lobby for, but rather to have armed guards at the school, because only a good guy with a gun can stop a bad guy with a gun. Even though I just said to you that the good guy with the gun at your school was totally ineffectual against the bad guy with the gun. But never mind that. I have, bought a copy of the Constitution, so you should listen to my internal dialogue, which isn't even consistent. Anyway, so let's see. In this case, she says, the Las Vegas shooter, not only could he not have done that by himself, but that it was really a false flag attack perpetrated by liberals who hate guns. The liberals who hate guns went out and bought guns and bump stocks so that their guns could fire like machine guns, and machine gunned a crowd of people to show that guns are bad so that we would all vote for gun control. Although, I got to tell you, I feel like a critical mass of gun-grabbing liberals were on board with that agenda before Las Vegas. Las Vegas was not a page-turner for liberals. Now, her theory, though, is that this was meant to be, you're making a stupid mistake here by saying that it was supposed to change liberal minds. It was supposed to change conservative minds. Her theory in her little car video is that by shooting a bunch of conservatives, by attacking a country music festival in Las Vegas, you would change the minds of bedrock conservatives who are pro-Second Amendment because now they've been shot. But I think we also kind of know from experience that that doesn't tend to change their minds either in the main. Did it change Steve Scalise's mind about gun control when he got shot? No, not at all, not in the least. And again, most of these people thought, if I had had my gun, I could have shot randomly into the Mandalay Bay Hotel and solved the problem. So anyway, 2017, she denies that it was a real attack and it was a false flag, etc., etc. You get the idea. Next in John's tweet thread here. Green believes the 2019 Christchurch mosque shootings in New Zealand also a false flag, for the same end as the false flag Las Vegas mass shooting, of course. It was going to change the minds of, I don't know, Muslims in New Zealand, where they have pretty strict gun control, and I guess it got stricter. So I guess that's supposed to be a check mark on the pro side for her theory. It did, in fact, convince New Zealanders to crack down on gun ownership. But I don't know that the Muslim community had anything to do with it. But all right, maybe they just figured, I don't know. I don't know what her justification is. Who cares? Whatever her mutterings in the car are here. Next up here, at a conservative conference in 2018, Green said 9/11 was part of a plot by the United States government. In August of 2020, she stated that she does not believe a missile hit the Pentagon. That's interesting. Is that a new statement, or maybe is that a misstatement by John that she does not believe a missile hit the Pentagon, because a missile didn't hit the Pentagon? It's usually the conspiracy theorist belief that a missile did hit the Pentagon and it wasn't the plane that hit the Pentagon. And I don't know whether this is a misstatement by John or her in August, at this late date, August of 2020, trying to clarify the record once she's called out as being a 9/11 conspiracy theorist who believed until that point that a missile had hit the Pentagon. No, I don't believe that. I disavow that position, so it's okay to let me into Congress. Not sure. Anyway, number 6 in the tweet thread here. Green has claimed Seth Rich, you all remember this conspiracy theory, the Democratic National Committee staff member who was murdered in D.C. She says he was murdered by MS-13 on behalf of Barack Obama, because they're always working together, don't you know? In a 2018 Facebook post found by Media Matters, Green agreed the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in Parkland, Florida was an organized false flag operation. That doesn't even come out in her video. She does it in a separate one. She just thinks that there ought to have been an armed guard there, even though there was an armed guard there, or whatever, in the video we saw. In a Facebook post, Green agreed that the 2012 Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting was a false flag operation. Alex Jones being successfully sued over that one. In a Facebook post in 2018, Green wrote, I am told that Nancy Pelosi tells Hillary Clinton several times a month, I'm told, I'm privy to this, that, quote, we need another school shooting in order to persuade the public to want strict gun control. What a weird way to get around to gun control, don't you think? It's not working, is it? David Hogue, survivor of the Parkland shooting and gun control advocate, has been called Little Hitler by Green. She calls him a coward and claims he is funded by George Soros. That's what we saw yesterday. In a 2018 Facebook post, Green agrees with the conspiracy theory known as, frazzle drip. I read about this one yesterday. You'll love this one. This one asserts that a video exists, that you would actually video this and keep it. A video exists of Hillary Clinton and her assistant, you remember Huma Abedin, murdering a child in a satanic ritual, and Clinton later orders a hit on police officers who know about it to cover it up. That doesn't even discuss the fact that apparently part of the ritual is torturing and killing this child and then cutting the skin off of its face and wearing that skin as a mask on your own face, which is totally what Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin were doing because they weren't busy at all. Green said that Muslim members of Congress should, quote, go back to the Middle East. Well, she's certainly not alone among the Republican Party there. They'll applaud her for that one. But yes, the frazzle drip thing I saw last night was what has convinced me that the office of the attending physician might be on reasonably solid ground in saying, yeah, she might need to be involuntarily committed for a psychiatric evaluation at some point. And, let's have it happen somewhere else other than here in Congress. What else have we got? Green thinks black people are held slaves to the Democratic Party, and said she would feel proud to see a Confederate monument if she were black because it symbolizes progress made since the Civil War. Remember how bad we were? Well, we're not that bad now, even though they are. So feel proud about that. Green liked Facebook comments calling for U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to be assassinated. Commenters were discussing Pelosi being removed from the speakership, and one wrote, a bullet to the head would be quicker. Green liked that specific comment. She also liked a second Facebook comment about Pelosi that read, through removal or death, doesn't matter as long as she goes. Green has also discussed hanging President Obama and Hillary Clinton. CNN found that on her Facebook page, Green also liked comments about executing FBI agents, also a popular pastime among the QAnon, I guess. According to Open Secrets, the House Freedom Fund, a PAC associated with Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, when he was, I guess, head of the Freedom Caucus, spent $44,000 backing Green and delivered $78,000 in earmarked contributions to her campaign. And who were among the donors to the House Freedom Fund? Just letting everybody know in case you want to effect a corporate boycott. Apparently GM and Juul, the vaping company. So, interesting note, I guess, to add to that. What else? So now calling generally for a boycott of people who supported the Freedom Fund, which supported her. And, so she's, does that mean she's worse than you thought, or pretty much the same thing that you once thought that she was? It's more evidence. That's good. Let's see what to do about it. Well, let me throw this one out. I haven't seen the House yet adopt its organizing resolutions. They have one similar to in the Senate. Basically, the organizing resolutions just being resolutions by which the House appoints members to various committees. And the Senate, they've had their drama over it, and we've described what's entailed in that. But the House has them too. And the House does them sometimes in bits and pieces. So I have seen so far, just by searching through the Congress.gov archives of the bills and resolutions that have been introduced to date, that a few members have been named to some committees. They needed some people for the House Administration Committee so that they could count the electoral votes as tellers on, January 6th. You remember that? So that's been taken care of. And there's been a resolution or two naming one or two people to various committees. I think the Ethics Committee needed filling out. And then I think I saw one for the Democrats, one for the Republicans, naming the new chairs of the committees and the new ranking Republican members of those committees. But the general membership, that I haven't seen. Though we have seen discussion in the news of what I guess is the intention, though it hasn't yet been done as far as I can tell, of naming Marjorie Taylor Greene to some key committees that she was going to sit on the Budget Committee along with Lauren Boebert, which is interesting. I mean, just the idea that these two are mentally capable of dealing with the abstractions of the federal budget seems ridiculous. But, they're there to vote against whatever the Democrat budget is. And not much more than that. They'll be useless when it comes to formulating the budget. They're just, automaton votes for whatever the Republican position is on that. But Let's see. Oh, look at that. Fun news from Twitter that says we get the nice on this one. There is a new stock price on GameStop, and I guess this is the smash hit among the Reddit crowd. The new price is $420, $420, okay, and 69 cents. Nice, as people have put here. Got a 420 and a 69 in there, and pretty good. That's a 21% jump just today. $73.18 gain. I guess somebody must have put in a big order at that price, probably for the purpose of getting this screen cap. Anyway, back to the House of Representatives, where I have not yet seen the resolutions naming the general membership to the committees, but I guess the parties have settled on their plans. And the other thing that got a lot of attention, besides her posting to the Budget Committee, which is usually considered kind of a plum committee, a prestige committee, although it's, again, usually reserved for people who have like ideas about the budget, as opposed to this it's very, I think, telling that the Republican leadership was receptive to the proposition. I don't know who made the proposition. I don't know if they asked to be on the Budget Committee. That's usually the case. And, these two probably thought, I don't know, that sounds like it's an important thing. The budget, like that's a big deal. So I should be on that, even though I don't really understand it. A little bit of Dunning-Kruger going on in the heads of both of these two. But the fact that the House leadership said, yeah, sure, you should absolutely get that posting is kind of amazing. They obviously view these people as rising stars as opposed to idiots who need to be hidden from view, which is bad news. The other posting that comes as, I guess, a bit of a surprise, given that we had just seen the video of her following and harassing the survivors of the school shooting in Parkland, Florida, is that she's landed herself on the Education Committee, where she will no doubt be advocating for arming teachers. Both Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert have, made no secret about their pro-gun agenda, but I guess you may not have necessarily known that was literally going to be all that they did. In the beginning of a new Congress, there's very often a flurry of legislation introduced, sometimes stuff that gets introduced annually and then just never goes anywhere, but members introduce them as their pet projects. And I happened to notice when I was looking for did Marjorie Taylor Greene actually file her articles of impeachment, which she did, and now the text is available in case you're interested in finding out what she thinks it was that Biden did that is impeachable. It's an interesting read. I found that she has just been running around co-sponsoring basically everything that she could find that had anything to do with guns, and that Lauren Boebert basically did the same. There's literally nothing else of interest to them that they've been able to identify so far. And granted, it's early, but it's, telling that they came to Congress with the idea in mind is I'll just sponsor a bunch of gun legislation. And then, I don't know, whatever other kind of like laws get made or whatever, I'll listen to Rush Limbaugh and see what I think, and then I'll vote. That's really not the way you're supposed to be serving in Congress. And they're not alone in that. Not even just among the special types, let's say, of Republicans who have landed in Congress. Madison Cawthorn, I saw the other day, for whatever reason, if you saw his signature on a Dear Colleague letter the other day, you got the sense that maybe he wasn't quite, up to speed and how to, present yourself in Congress, how to conduct yourself in Congress. Saw a story yesterday. I hope I parked it in Pocket. Otherwise, I'll have to look around for it. But I guess somebody got hold of an email of his responding to, I don't know who, but basically, I guess they were asking him to, was he going to take some position or another thing, or how was he going to approach his legislative agenda? And for whatever reason, he decided to commit to writing in this email response that he has kind of actually, sorry, I don't mean to disappoint you here, but I've kind of built my staff around messaging and communications, comms, as he says, because he loves the military sort of thing. I've built my staff around comms as opposed to like around that other stuff, legislating. He doesn't have any legislative aides. He just has a bunch of communications aides because he doesn't have any plans to legislate on anything. He just wants to run around doing messaging stuff, which is an option that's available to you. And maybe the people in his district will be happy with that and nothing else. He wasn't really going to be able to accomplish anything from the minority anyway. So maybe it's okay for them. I don't know. But ordinarily, you at least try to pretend, oh yeah, right. I'm serving my constituents and serving as their voice in the legislative branch. I'm not going to be doing any legislating in the legislative branch. Not really something you ordinarily would admit to all that readily. Anyway, so as I was saying, some surprising committee assignments are said to be in the offing for Marjorie Taylor Greene. But again, they have not actually done this stuff on the floor yet. So I would like to suggest, having seen at least one or two members of Congress express some real serious concerns about her, that they not agree, as usually is the case, certainly by unanimous consent, not agree to the Republican organizing resolution. Or it's one of those things that's just not done because, you start an escalating war and things are, as I love to say, tit for tat. And usually the parties get to pick among their membership who's going to serve where and on what committees, and you don't get in the way of that. The Democrats don't get in the way of the Republican one, and the Republicans don't get in the way of the Democratic one, and everybody gets the committee assignments that their party intends for them to have. But there's an opportunity here to get in the way of that for Republicans. It could start an escalating war, that's true, a mean or vindictive Republican Party, and you'd never have one of those, right? Could later on, if they manage to gain back the majority in the House, could deny the Democrats any seats on any committees by blocking their organizing resolution in retaliation for this. But I'm wondering whether we're in a spot yet where you could say, well, ordinarily not only are these things rushed right through, but they go through by unanimous consent. And a skilled parliamentarian with the right temperament could find themselves on the floor at the moment that the Republican organizing resolution is brought to the floor and unanimous consent to regard it as passed is asked. And you might then say either that you object, or if you want to be shrewd about it, you say, well, reserving the right to object, which is just putting you on notice that, well, I might object at the end of this, but I'm not sure. Let's see how this goes, this conversation. And you can actually do this and sometimes get a little debate going on the reservation of the right to object. By reserving the right to object, I would like to offer the gentleman from the other side the opportunity to rethink the committee assignments of Marjorie Taylor Greene, who in particular does not belong on the Education Committee, and quite frankly, probably not a good fit for the Budget Committee either, given all that we've learned and all that we've all witnessed together about how she conducts herself in the House of Representatives. And you might then test to see whether, look, you did this with Steve King. You found your courage when Steve King's racism was brought to the fore, and you were embarrassed by it, and you stripped him of his committee assignments. All I'm asking right now, forget the expulsion for the moment, doesn't the same thing obtain here? Should she not be subject to the same censure by your party? And if you don't think so, then I will object to the passage of your organizing resolution. Don't worry, though. All that means is that we'll have to have a roll call vote on passage. And, you'll probably all vote for it. But I will remind you, you are in the minority. It is possible that all Democrats could agree with me and think it was important enough that all Republicans ought to be blocked from their committee assignments unless they do something as a party about Marjorie Taylor Greene. Bring back the same resolution without her name in it, and it will pass in a heartbeat, maybe even by unanimous consent. You'll all get the committee assignments you're entitled to. You just have to make sure she doesn't get anything that she shouldn't be entitled to. Now, there might be other people you want to include in that list. Lauren Boebert, of course, comes to mind. Marcy Wheeler thought perhaps Devin Nunes ought to be on that list. And he probably should be, but it might be a harder sell until you can come up with a raft of incriminating videos about him. I mean, there sort of were some during the Ukraine and Russia investigations, but everybody has sort of forgotten about those by now. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is just sort of the hot property in that respect. So anyway, I would suggest that they do that. I don't think that they will, but the opportunity is there unless the resolution went through yesterday and I just didn't see it. But usually I would at least have seen if it was filed. So it may still be pending. And if that's the case, that opportunity exists and they ought to exercise it. It's an interesting penalty to lean on short of expulsion, since I don't think they'll get to the 2/3 on that. But it can certainly be done by majority vote. And in fact, all it really takes to get the ball rolling is one member to object. So I suggest that somebody think about doing that and getting to it. All right, we got one more segment yet ahead of us. There's probably some other stories we really ought to touch on. I'll convince myself one way or the other during this next 2-minute break, and we'll see what the results are when we return. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yeah, okay, so I want to get that idea out there, but we'll be talking about it a little bit later on Twitter. Somebody ought to be objecting at least to Marjorie Taylor Greene and her committee assignments. But speaking of the committee assignments, I see that Joan is tweeting that there's still no organizing resolution, despite the supposed arrival at a agreement on the non-necessity for a written agreement on filibuster protection. Still no organizing resolution brought to the floor in the Senate to date, and it's getting in the way of things. And there are committees that still claim to be chaired by Republicans. And I've had some pushback from some people who I think make fairly good arguments about the theory that I espoused, and still kind of untested this theory, but the opportunity is there to test it, that senators who are newly reelected would not have officially, should not be considered to have committee assignments at the moment. The argument against that, of course, is the old continuing body theory, which longtime listeners and longtime readers will remember is the theory that the Senate doesn't really turn over in the same way that the House does when they reelect their entire body every 2 years. Only 1/3 of the Senate stands for election every 2 years, and even though they agree to designate themselves along with the House as the 117th Congress, the 116th Congress, et cetera, that the Senate as a body continues, and so therefore its rules continue from one Congress to the next without specifically readopting them the way they do in the House, right? And that was supposed to be the excuse underlying how it is that the Senate can continue with its rules from one Congress to the next that required, according to the rules, anyway, a 2/3 vote for cloture, not 60 votes, but 67 votes, a 2/3 vote for cloture on a proposition to change the rules. This was all part of the original study of the mechanism by which you could or couldn't, depending on your view, change filibuster rules with just a majority vote, right? The old thinking was that it would take 67 votes in a full Senate anyway to invoke cloture on a rules change so that you could get rid of the filibuster. But instead, the mechanism ended up being, it ended up being 50 votes to simply establish a new precedent for how to interpret the rules without actually changing the rules that underlie the whole thing. But originally, back when they were trying to call the nuclear option the constitutional option, there was this theory, and we spent time on it, and the shows exist. They're out there, but see if we can long story short this one. This is tough stuff, actually. But the theory was that the Senate wasn't really necessarily a continuing body per se, and that what was really happening was not that the rules automatically continued because 2/3 of the body remained the same in each election cycle, but rather that the Senate, instead of specifically readopting its rules, adopted its rules sort of by proxy in a way, that by continuing to do regular Senate business as though the rules continued, they were all acceding to the continuation of those rules, but that on the first day of a new Congress, remember all this way back when the first day of a new Congress was important in all of this? On the first day of a new Congress, there was an opportunity for a senator to speak up and say, now hold on here, I am objecting to the unanimous agreement that the rules will continue. I question whether or not the rules continue. And in fact, I would say that before we do any business and thereby accede to the continuance of the rules, we should have a debate on whether or not they really do continue. And if not, do we have the opportunity to change them? And if they don't continue, then that one rule in there that says that you need a 2/3 majority for cloture on a rules change doesn't exist at this moment. Now, that was kind of a wacky theory, but the whole thing was predicated on the idea that the president of the Senate, the vice president, if he was there presiding over the session, or whoever was in the chair, but on the first day it might very well be the president of the Senate, that the president could rule on the question of whether or not this magical moment really existed. And that in the 1950s, at one point, they managed to convince Richard Nixon to make such a ruling. And a few other presidents of the Senate have reaffirmed that ruling in the years since, that on the first day of a new Congress, before proceeding to regular business, if some senator said, well, wait a minute, if it is the continuance of regular business that stands for, that I guess closes the books on whether or not we can revisit the rules, then I object to continuing with our business. Let's look at the rules. And I propose that we change the filibuster rule and that a majority vote, simple majority vote, ought to be sufficient for invoking cloture on the question, because the 2/3 rule doesn't exist yet until we accede to it by continuing with regular business, and that's why I've stopped us. So that was the old theory of how the filibuster rules needed to be changed. But then they realized at some point, well, if it's just a matter of getting a favorable ruling from the chair on precedent and upholding it with 51 votes, then we can really do it at any time that we like. It doesn't have to be the first day of a new Congress. You can do it whenever you want. We're not changing the rules, we're changing precedents, that's all. So different set of guidelines, if you don't want to confuse people by using the word rules. Anyway, so with all that in mind, why do we even need to get back to this again? Well, we were talking about organizing resolutions and the need to do this in the Senate and to check on precedents. The continuing body theory, the thinking is, would continue over or would govern the workings of committees of the Senate just the same way it governs the whole body of the Senate. If the whole body of the Senate is a continuing body, and that theory has, I guess, survived for now because people have figured out that they didn't really need to defeat the continuing body theory in order to get, in effect, what they wanted out of filibuster reform. We don't need to defeat the continuing body theory to defeat the idea that we need 2/3 vote on cloture to change the rules, because we're not changing the rules, we're changing the precedents, right? So that has sort of frozen the continuing body theory in time. So I guess it's still sticking around. So now the theory is, if the Senate is a continuing body, then so are its committees. And if that's the case, then it's possible, in their minds, that a newly reelected senator, reelected to his second, third, fourth term, who, say, used to serve on the Judiciary Committee in his first term, though his first term has expired and he's been elected to a new one and had to take the oath all over again on the Senate floor, or else he wouldn't be a senator, somehow, magically, the continuing body of the Senate still required him to take the oath again. His oath didn't carry over from one term to the next for some reason, and the reason is an intervening election. But in addition to that, yes, he has to take the oath again, but over in the committees, he doesn't have to rejoin the committee. He's already on it from last time. Now, there was a problem with that also in looking at the organizing resolutions. You'll find that the organizing resolution says that for the last Congress says, for the 116th Congress, these will be the members of the committee. And of course, the 116th Congress is over. But it was pointed out to me that the language of the resolution has another phrase in there that I somehow missed in the reading that says, these will be the members of these committees for the 116th Congress, or until their successors are chosen. So that got circled and highlighted and sent back to me, and people said, well, so in other words, people who were members of the Judiciary Committee last time, who got reelected, are still members of the Judiciary Committee because they are members not only for the 116th Congress, but until their successors are chosen. Now, if they're succeeding themselves, fine, so much the better. The accounting is easier, but that's why they continue on from one Congress to the next. Of course, the problem with that is some senators lose, or some senators retire. But in either way, there are some people who are no longer senators, right? But were members of the Judiciary Committee for the 116th Congress, or until their successors are chosen. But they're talking about successors in the seat in the committee, not to their Senate seats, right? So if no one has been chosen as a successor to, say, Lamar Alexander on committees where Lamar Alexander served, what are we to make of this? The reading that says that re-elected senators get to continue from one Congress to the next, even though the terms of the organizing resolution say 116th Congress or until successors are chosen. Well, if the until successors are chosen applies to one senator, it should apply to all. Is Lamar Alexander still a member of the committees he served on when he was a member of the 116th Congress, even though he hasn't been elected to the 117th Congress? That would seem absurd. But no successor's been chosen. So maybe it means something else. Maybe it's something that only applies to members who've been reelected. But it can only make sense if it applies in saying, no, you got to be selected to the committees again. Just like you have to take the oath again on the House floor, you got to be selected to the committee again. I think that's the only consistent way of reading the two. So the opportunity still exists for Democrats on certain committees to simply show up at a meeting of the committee and attempt to take the gavel and ask the committee parliamentarian, isn't it the case that people who were reelected to new terms really aren't members of this committee yet? And of course, whatever the ruling, there'll probably be an appeal and people will need to vote on whether or not to sustain or reject that appeal. But it's got to be limited to people who are supposed to be members of the committee. And depending on what the ruling is, who knows what people would consider to be members of the committee at that point. So it's a bit of a sticky wicket, I guess, as the cricket culture might have us say. But we're not part of cricket culture here in America. We just like the expression because it sounds funny. But that's a real problem. And I still think that they ought to settle it. And I guess given the fact that there's been no organizing resolution, the time is right to try and settle it. Now, the other theory has some merit, I guess. And maybe you want to test that one too. What's been interesting, of course, is, I was hoping that the lack of an organizing resolution preventing Democrats from taking gavels would be the kind of leverage you would need to convince people like Joe Manchin and Kirsten? I don't know. Sinema. We know it's Sinema anyway. Senator Sinema, I ought not to be addressing her by her first name anyway. That it would convince them that at least in this one little instance, they might really need to give their votes to an effort to defeat the filibuster, at least for this organizing resolution. Maybe not for all of them, but at least for this one, if you can engineer it as such. There are lots of problems with continuing with that as a precedent on the books, but there are ways to deal with that too, probably subject of another show. But I thought that might change their minds, at least for this one. And it should still for Sinema, because she serves on a committee that, by either interpretation, continuing body or not, and allowing reelected senators to reclaim their seats or not, remains in the hands of Republicans. The Commerce Committee, for some reason, just luck of the draw in this case, would still be majority Republican. But Joe Manchin's would be majority Democratic, also under either interpretation of the rules. Whether reelected senators continue in service or not, there are more Democrats who are still in the Senate who have a claim to have been legitimately assigned and to be current members of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee than there are Republicans. Now, I also saw Joan commenting the other day that Lisa Murkowski was doing the right and honorable thing by handing the gavel over to Joe Manchin and allowing him to run the hearings. Yesterday they were doing some confirmation hearings, I think, and I don't even remember exactly who it was for. But Joe Manchin was running the things. However, the website, which is not, an official indication of what the Republican position on things is, website still says Murkowski's the chairperson. And as a matter of fact, if you watch the video, she's still sitting there at the center of the dais with the little nameplate on it that says Ms. Murkowski, chairwoman. I don't know if it's a chairman or chairwoman or chairperson or just chair. I forget what they have on her nameplate. And Joe Manchin's didn't have one, but then again, maybe they haven't gotten around to making the Joe Manchin one yet, but they certainly have a Murkowski one that doesn't say chair on it. They could have put that in there. But anyway, she was letting him chair the committee, which is the right thing to do, and it was nice, and it was good to see Joan giving her props for it. However, there's really, she really had no other choice, because again, under either theory, continuing body or not, continuing service or not, Murkowski couldn't muster a majority to remain in the chair of that committee because there were many more Democrats than there were Republicans that are assigned to that committee. So that would have been a great place to test that out and to test the theory and to find out why it is that Joe Manchin really should have the gavel in his hands. And if it's the continuing body theory prevails there or not, or even if it does, whether that overcomes the weird, if you're a continuing body believer, it's a weird thing that you require an oath from senators who are continuing in office. There must be a reason for it. And, the reason's pretty logical. It's a new term. And I think the same thing should apply on these committees, and I don't know why it doesn't. They should have tested it out, and maybe they can test it out there. But I don't know why it has to be a matter of Murkowski's courtesy. Other members should try it out, particularly. There weren't a whole lot of committees, by the way, that under the, what we'll call for shorthand purposes, the continuing body theory of committee service, that would fall to Democratic hands if newly reelected members were considered to be continuing in service. And I think it might even have been the case that Energy and Natural Resources was the only one with an outright Democratic majority under that interpretation. Armed Services, Banking, Finance, Health, and VA would have ties, I think. And then all the other committees would still have majority Republicans if they just continued in service, which is why it's important to challenge this thing. Anyway, very interesting that they still don't have that settled over there, and one wonders what they are haggling over next, although maybe they're just holding it up saying, oh, well, the impeachment's getting in the way, and we just can't do this other business until we're done with impeachment, which is, again, another good reason to send it to committee. And which committee would you send it to? Remember, it's a special committee appointed specifically for that purpose when they're talking about impeaching judges. So there would need to be an organizing resolution as an order of the Senate in the impeachment trial that, would be, I guess, then not subject to filibuster, to name that committee and its members and get them started. They really ought to revive the idea and get that finished up. Okay. Let's see. Other things that we probably ought to bring to everyone's attention. Let's dive back into Pocket and see what we've got here. Wanted to make note of the fact that I guess the D.C. Metropolitan Police, the city's police department, apparently reporting to members of Congress on Tuesday at a hearing that, some basic facts about what happened on January 6th in terms of their commitment, to the defense of the Capitol and the costs of that in all senses here. 850 of the D.C. Police Department's officers responded to the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th, costing city taxpayers at least $8.8 million, though a final price tag is likely to be higher. Also noting here, the issue of cost is a sensitive one for many D.C. officials who say that policing inaugural festivities and protests against the federal government drains city coffers. True, obviously, but that the federal reimbursement for the 2017 inauguration remains outstanding. And that's interesting. I guess that's actually the federal government's contribution to it, as opposed to costs that should have been passed on or sometimes might be passed along in part anyway to the inaugural committees itself. So it's different, I guess, in this formulation from what Donald Trump's inaugural committee owes the city, and they may still have outstanding debt there too. It's kind of a regular feature of doing business with Donald Trump that you don't get the bills paid. But on top of all of that, I guess, diminished in seriousness, given that we also have news of another police officer who has committed suicide following the insurrection. We heard about the U.S. Capitol police officer. His name is Howard Liebengood, who killed himself in the aftermath of the attack. And, of course, we know about Brian Sicknick, who was killed in the attack. But apparently a D.C. police officer has done the same. Jeffrey Smith died by suicide in the days following the incident. I'm just, I'm at a loss to who can discuss what they must have been feeling. It's surprising to me that this would happen, but it did. So Republicans, of course, not interested in reckoning with any of this. But anyway, I thought some important points made in this hearing. And I guess speaking of hearings that are going forward, there's another one of some interest. I guess we'll be seeing more of this in the House, even though the Supreme Court thinks emoluments cases are moot, and Republican senators like to think that the impeachment case against Donald Trump is moot. In the House, they don't think so. Here is news of a hearing of which the House Oversight Committee, in this case, it's Subcommittee on Economic and Consumer Policy, under the direction of Chair of that subcommittee, Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, who is leading an investigation into the Trump administration's purchase of ventilators during the early peak of the coronavirus pandemic crisis. There's lots of reporting at the time that they mishandled the procurement and that prices far beyond what ought to have been paid may have been paid, and to who knows who in exchange for those ventilators, some of which showed up where they were supposed to and some of which didn't. Subject of a lot of questions, and now an official inquiry in the House of Representatives, and that's kind of good news. Glad to see that one getting underway. Let's see. Other pieces of information here that we want to throw in here. Lots of attention paid to this one. Happened to see on Twitter Jane Meyer of The New Yorker circulating this video. Unclear who actually took the video, but with this fun comment. Video of the lobby of the Trump Hotel in D.C. completely empty. And I mean literally completely empty. They're doing a 360-degree turnaround in here, and I do not see anybody, including staff, anywhere in the lobby and foyer, if you will. But even the bar appears to be untended, even though the TVs are on. Her comment here, Trump Hotel D.C. looks like they drained the swamp. Very funny, and everybody enjoyed it, but my own commentary on it also got plenty of likes and retweets. I guess this video answers the question of whether the D.C. hotel was basically just an emoluments laundering facility, a bribe laundering facility, everybody just coming and paying to eat, drink, and stay there because they knew the money was going into the pocket of the then president. So was it just an emoluments laundering facility, or was it in fact, as Trump claimed, just, hey, not my fault, it's a world-class destination hotel that everybody wants to be at for the service and the atmosphere and the delicious food and drink? Well, you can't bribe the president this way anymore. So it appears nobody's interested in the delicious food and drink or world-class service and accommodations. Because that answers the question. It was just an emoluments factory. Not that the Supreme Court gives a crap one way or the other, because now it's moot, even though this probably would have been interesting evidence in a trial about that question. All right. What other fun stuff? A great compilation by Ryan Goodman and Justin Hendricks over at Just Security, where they have compiled and written up their compilation of video evidence of incitement at by the president and others in the Capitol insurrection. Fight for Trump. Video evidence of incitement at the Capitol. Not only clips from the speeches that allegedly incited people, but video evidence of people screaming at the riot that they were incited to do this by President Trump. Something we already knew about, but if you would like some legal analysis lent to those compilations, you might want to go and take a look, and then take a look at the video that they've put together over at Just Security. Let's see, just a few more minutes left. In fact, a few more seconds left. Let's see. Plenty of other things to look in on and read up on, but anything that we can squeeze in here. Oh, yeah. Well, here's an interesting piece that also got circulated rather widely yesterday. Brandy Zadrozny of NBC News circulating the news that notorious troll and white nationalist Ricky Vaughn, a Twitter personality known as Ricky Vaughn, whose real name is Douglas Mackey, has been charged with election interference for, quote, disseminating misinformation designed to deprive individuals of their constitutional right to vote, unquote, in the 2016 election, and facing up to 10 years in prison for doing it. Some screenshots of what? Is this press release? Yes, from the Southern District of New York, I think, probably, but datelined Brooklyn, outlining the case against him. Basically, this was somebody who was involved in, unfortunately, fairly common practice of disseminating misinformation about what day to vote on, or whether people could, in this case, vote from home by texting a certain number and indicating who they were voting for that way, and that those votes would be counted and you need not show up at the polls in 2016. Notorious dirty trick, and this time they're finally going to bring a prosecution for it, and that's good news. Although Republicans, of course, insist, wow, dark news for free speech out there, all the people who are trying to trick people out of their right to vote. And that brings us to another question of, is there really a constitutional right to vote anyway? Not entirely clear on that one, and it's been a progressive project for a little while to think about bringing a constitutional amendment that makes that explicit. But I haven't gotten around to that one. I've been busy with some other things, and I also don't hold a seat in Congress. Maybe that'll change someday, but hopefully not. In the meantime, it's time to change programs. Over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next. And as always, there's a million things that we haven't gotten to yet that he has and he knows all about, and will explain to you very thoroughly.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, well, we still got plenty to do for the rest of the week. Tomorrow, Friday, we'll still be back on the air. We'll bring a guest in, a returning guest, Ellie Zupnik, who is with the Fix Our Senate campaign. Very timely discussion, I think. Time for another one about filibuster reform. We'll see what's going on the professional left.